God of the universe, maker of the stars. Who am I that you would know my name?
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode number 70 of Life on Purpose. Here with, here with Mike Clayton, obviously, and myself, Alex Stiles. Very much missing our fellow Daniel. You know, he's out there trying to do that thing of raising tiny humans.
Yeah. And him and Catesby have got their hands full. We got it to experience a little bit of that, Kathy and I, on Monday. She got to experience more of it than I did because I had something to do during the morning, but came in and got a couple of hours. And there's a reason why you have children when you're young, Alex.
Oh, you are not kidding.
Yeah.
I had that brief period a while back where we had my nieces and nephews come over who were the 2 and 3. And let me tell you, Mike, it has been a long time since I have done the 6 a.m. unwashed, unshaven, uncaffeinated run to Walmart for formula. Now, have you even been a dad if you haven't done the AM run for formula? I don't know. And I realized I didn't miss it.
Oh,
don't you?
Yeah, I celebrated the last time, and this is 29 years ago. For me, I celebrated the day that I no longer had to walk down the baby food aisle, and total celebration the day that I no longer walk down the diaper aisle. I still to this day don't walk down those aisles just because I can.
Kind of yes, right. Just because you can.
Yeah.
Amazing season in your life. People ask me,
is.
do you miss it? And I'm like, no, not at all. Don't you wish your children were babies again? I'm like, no, no, I do not. I enjoy my sons the age they are now. I do not miss those at all.
Yeah, I know. I know that Mary would, Mary would probably have 140 of them around the house, but if you let her, so.
Yeah. Occasionally, but that's why she always. I think that's why she always babysits all of her nieces and nephews.
I noticed that.
I never know. I never know how many children are going to be in my house when I come home.
Well, hey, we want to get into a subject. This past Shabbat at our house in my basement, actually, is where Life Assembly meets, and I did a teaching that I've done many, many times, literally all over the world. But this was the first time you and Mary, the boys, had a chance to experience this, and it's a teaching on the tabernacle. Now, when we go through the scripture, you get to these scriptures, the verses of Exodus chapter 25, and it says that Moshe was told to tell the people to bring an offering of everything that a person, whatever they wholeheartedly want to give, and then it starts getting into details about curtains and gold and silver and all of these things. And, some people kind of lose track there, but you probably are going to look at those verses a little different. I'm just thinking.
Oh, wow. Yes. So I've always been simultaneously baffled and interested and confused by those verses there, right? Because you've met me, I'm a visual person. I manipulate 3-dimensional things in my head. It's it's a lot of what I do, anatomy and physiology and stuff as a nurse. But I tell you, I'd go through all that and I'm like, what did that look like?
Yeah.
And then there's another scenario. You think about people who will have, you see so many people that do paintings, they'll do drawings, everything. But see, I was always suspicious because I'm like, do they really know what they're talking about?
Yeah.
So honestly, one of the most fascinating things, and a long list of fascinating things, was to get to, I actually went searching on the internet and found those pictures of the tabernacle that you'd included in your slides.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I have wanted to study or ask somebody who had studied enough that had some confidence and said, "Hey, this is what the tabernacle looked like."
Mm-hmm.
And now that may sound like, "Oh, wow, that was the peak of your day. You figured out what the tabernacle actually looked like." I'm like, actually, that ended up being one of the least things, and that was still amazing.
Okay.
So having that visual there was very fascinating. Having somebody who's taught on this literally for a few decades, right? I guess
Mm.
you've done a few decades worth of teaching
Yeah, I started
there.
teaching on the Tabernacle, being a part of that back in 1997.
Yeah, so like that's an amazing opportunity.
Oh yeah.
And I'll come back around to this, but uh, this will make sense as I link this in. They say that my generation will change careers 4 to 5 times in their life, right? And I mean jobs. You work fast food, you work 4 or 5 fast
Mm-hmm.
foods, or you work construction. I mean, talking straight up change careers four or
Mm-hmm.
five times.
Mm.
We'll divide that to working through 60, and nobody's going to get more than about 5, 8 years experience in anything,
Yeah.
like more than about 10 years in experience. So I think not just in having actually the concept of studying something, but the concept of being an expert on anything in life. Almost nobody I meet seems to have more than 10 years experience in anything if you're constantly changing, right? Constantly changing
Yeah.
careers,
True.
constantly changing what you study.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's amazing, and it fascinates me this concept when I meet with you, interact with you, and get a chance to talk about these things. To be the chance to speak to someone who has literally spent decades studying, and I don't mean that to like, hey, let's make Mike Clayton feel old. No,
Well,
I mean that
you're
in the
doing good at
deepest
that.
respect.
By the way, just yeah.
Hey, you're welcome. You're welcome. What is the younger generation for but making it? My
Yeah.
children did that to me a few months back.
Yeah.
Judd, he did that to me when he got asking about birthdays and
Uh-huh.
said, "No, wait, Dad, you were born in the 1900s?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "I'm taking your allowance, kid." So, an absolutely fascinating chance to have that interaction with a teacher there, and I asked myself constantly what I was going to do in this Life on Purpose podcast.
Mm-hmm.
What was I going to talk about? Because that was as soon as we finished the Tabernacle teaching, it was like, well, this is clearly what we're talking about when we record.
Okay.
And so, like, for me to give y'all who are listening this interaction, like, it would take 5 hours, Mike
Mm-hmm.
Clayton's basement, and a box of tissues
Yeah.
to give you the full run through.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, what can I cover? Oh wow! So I've been thinking for days about this podcast. Is all I want to say.
Okay. And so
Been excited.
as you're thinking about that, I want to just tell people that the teaching that we did is something that I've done, and I'm actually going to be doing this in over in Georgia, probably in September, and then for Sukkot, both in Georgia and Tennessee. And this is not just about, okay, let's go through all the details of all of this, but it is the interactive part that we have that has been placed into this, to where once you kind of embrace the message, the function, not just the form, but the function of the tabernacle, then I give people an opportunity to actually walk through that and experience the function. Go ahead.
Yes, and that was one of the most amazing parts of it was to walk through this and understand, as you clarified, this representation of the
Mm-hmm.
tabernacle, to be able to teach on it, and then to have us walk through it. Part of the amazing part, yes, is the connection to the history. But if you just get a connection to the history, you've missed something.
Mm-hmm.
Because the entire setup of the tabernacle was prophecy into the future.
Oh yeah.
And I loved one thing you talked, and where we talked very much about people focusing on the form.
Mm-hmm.
Like even those who would study extensively on the setup of the tabernacle would study, exactly what size was the outer court, and exactly what colors, and exactly what materials. And you could go deeper and deeper and deeper.
Mm-hmm.
The expression I've heard and that I liked very much as you explained that was you could spend months and months and months perfecting the building of your kitchen, right
Yeah.
down to exactly all of that. But if you never step into that kitchen, and cook a meal, you're still starving. You can
Yeah.
perfect the form. You don't ever step in there and understand the function of what you're working with. So basically, you took us to the tabernacle and we cooked a meal with it instead of looking at the function of it. Instead of looking at it just strictly at the form, but
Yeah.
understanding what all of it meant.
Yeah.
And oh wow, so I ended up actually going home, and you cost me sleep that night. I ended up staying home that night, and literally before I could forget anything, I just went through a notebook and wrote like 3 or 4 pages of notes before I would forget anything. Like, what could I talk about this process? So that was what I was going to do next. I kind of talk about what it was like walking through that representation of the tabernacle. And as I said, you're only going to get a touch of it. You're not going to get the full 5 hour teaching experience here that I wish I could give everyone that's listening. But from starting outside, you had us all step outside. And before I was going to come through and I was going to walk through this tabernacle, I'm like, I should pray. If I'm getting ready to take a test at school, I take a moment to get my head in the right mindset before I do this. How much more important should I take a moment to get my mind in the right mindset before I step through this? So I was sitting there and I was praying, and I had this deep feeling initially of this idea that you touched on, that God created us. And we blow right over that too easy. We just skip right on by that. But there's every one of us to some degree, I think, has some degree of self-loathing. And now it's easy to have some degree of self-loathing. You're like, oh, I made bad decisions.
Yeah.
That's a little understandable if you dislike that you make bad decisions. But I propose that most of us have self-loathing of who and what we are.
Wow. Okay.
Now, there's an easy representation of that I think all of us understand. Women get picked on for it, but understand men do very similar for different reasons. The statement that is frequently true is, every brunette wants to be blonde. Every woman out there with curly hair wishes it was straight. There's that dissatisfaction with the way we were made. Men are just as guilty of this, or suffer just as much from this, I should say. If you look at the man who is, I want to be stronger, I want to be faster, or I don't want to be as short, something like that. Then there's your personality. I laugh too loud. I've heard that. My wife, I'm picking on you, Mary, because I love you. My wife says, oh, I don't like my laugh because I laugh too loud. Really? Because God gave you a laugh that lights up the room.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no doubt.
I dare you to hear Mary laugh at something and not smile yourself.
Yeah, you do.
Right? Like, you smile. So as you hear Mary laugh about something, it brings a smile to your face because there's such unrestrained joy. But the temptation there is that self-loathing of, I don't like that. So here I propose, stop saying that, because that's the way God created you. Why would you loathe something that he created and said it is good?
Wow.
I haven't even darkened the doors yet of this tabernacle representation.
So you're still sitting outside. Okay.
I'm still outside, right? Okay, I'm outside on the sunshine in the grass on my knees praying to God, coming to this realization of all these chained things about my personality that I didn't like. And I don't mean my choices, but I mean literally the personality of the kind of person I am that I haven't liked. And I'm like, God created me this way. And I'm sitting here not liking it when he took the time and the effort to create me the way that I am.
Wow.
I could have lost sleep just over that and went home and we could have an entire podcast just on that.
Yeah.
But as you said, that was literally just outside the doors. So then I meet this prayer, right? God meets me right there on the grass of the lawn outside your house. And then I step into it, and I went in there with the belief that God was going to meet me there, right? And that each step, I wasn't going to move past each item, not station, or by trying each part.
Yeah, I don't know what people have called it furniture, which I think is really kind of weird. And then item is like, doesn't do it. I've never come up with a good word of, you know, what each place is, because each one is complex in itself, and each one is a message in itself. And just coming up with a word to describe where you are is kind of tough.
I was afraid it was just me.
No, no, no.
Oh, yeah. So it's interesting that I'll take y'all through step by step and how God met me at each spot.
Mm,
So I step through the first door, through the way into the and the first thing you come up to is the altar.
mhm.
All right. And here's the interesting thought I felt is that you don't get to, you talked about standing outside the tabernacle, and you've got knowledge, but you're not really a part of it.
Yeah,
You may have knowledge, but you don't have a relationship until you've
right.
stepped into the inner courtyard. Well, here's the interesting thing that I was thinking is that you don't walk into that courtyard, you don't walk into the tabernacle at all without a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I would propose that, understand, every step of this is prophetic through to Yeshua. Every step of this is prophetic towards the Messiah, to how we should be living our lives for God. So I would propose that until you are stepping in and willing to make a living sacrifice, willing to make sacrifices, you don't ever move from knowledge of Him into a deeper relationship.
Mm. Okay. Now you're gonna keep me awake.
You are welcome. So we read where I believe it was Paul who was talking about presenting ourselves as a living sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
So the idea of, to some extent, by how do you present yourself as a living sacrifice? Well, I would propose that part of that is that our living sacrifice may be what we give up to live our lives for Him.
Mm.
You start really following God and you start living by the Torah, you start walking in your revelation of Him. Hey, a few things you're going to lose. You're going to lose a little popularity with some people.
Yeah.
Lose some friends. You're going to lose some social gatherings you're not invited to.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it may not be something as simple as, I didn't get invited to the barbecue because everybody knows I won't eat pork.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm talking way more than just if you stepped in and walked towards, I'm going to eat kosher. I'm talking if you're a denominational church out there and you're not even walking yet in the Torah, but if you're walking in, I'm going to live my life the way I believe God would want me to live, you're going to lose some friends and you're going to sacrifice a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And I would propose that the second part and the second representation of that sacrifice is what we're putting to death is not presenting a lamb or the turtle doves or whatever that might be. I would propose what we're putting to death is the old man that we were.
Mm-hmm.
Putting to death the old person that we used to be. Ryan Cribbs, David with Exodus Road Band, they have an absolutely amazing song. Oh heavens, of course, Mercy Killing, I think is the name of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Go listen to that one. Listen to it under that perspective
Mm-hmm.
of offering your sacrifice to God. Oh, we could linger so long there, but after you've made your sacrifice and you walk further in, as I understand, the next thing we come to is the laver. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we walk up where we wash our hands in the laver, which is this, it's this bowl, for lack of a better word. It's this large bowl with a mirror on the bottom, as I understand, filled with water. You go in there and you wash your hands, which are covered with the blood of the sacrifice that you've just made. And now you're looking down, and as you lean over this laver and wash your hands, you see your own reflection.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the problem at this point. Now you see your reflection through the blood. I would propose that at that point, the next step after making your sacrifice to God, the next step is that you need to start seeing yourself as God sees you. When God looks down at you, He no longer sees the corrupt person that we were.
Yeah.
He now sees you literally looking through the blood of Yeshua. So I propose, and maybe I'm going a little bit different than what you say, but I say that the next step that you have to make after you've made the sacrifice is you have to change how you look at yourself. You've taught on this a lot, Mike, and you're about one of the few people I hear teaching on it. Stop walking around singing, I'm just an old sinner.
Yeah.
Stop saying, oh, why'd he save such a worm as I?
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, 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 no. You're grafted into his kingdom. You're adopted. You are royalty. You are his high priest. You are like the list goes on. So I propose before we can move farther, after we put to death this old person that we were, after we've made these sacrifices, I'd say that the very next step that you have to do is change how you see yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you'll start seeing yourself, you could actually start seeing your own full potential.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the wild part. What keeps us from reaching the potential, everything we could be, and reaching the potential that God wants us to be? Well, I'd say it would be the corruption, right?
Yeah.
We were created as perfect beings. We have fallen. We're corrupted. Therefore, we don't reach everything that we could be, right?
Yeah.
Basic concept. Well, if you'll start viewing yourself without that corruption, then you'd actually be able to see your own full potential. And maybe you would absolutely not be satisfied, right, with not living up to that potential. Because he doesn't see you as this corrupted, fallen being anymore. He sees you just as you look into that laver and see yourself through the blood in the mirror. He now sees you through the blood of the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Sure. And he
And
can't
let me insert in
Yeah,
here that
please.
Alex, that we did not have actual blood. Okay.
All right.
It was just water in the basin. But I know how rumors go. And
what
so
were
I
you
was
doing in
teaching
your basement, Mike Clayton?
I was teaching the prophetic significance of all of this, and all we had there was water, but he was imagining what the blood mixed with
Right.
the
Oh,
water would
heavens.
be.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Just trying to keep
Real.
myself out of a ditch there. If you don't mind.
Yeah. We don't slaughter the chickens until next week, right?
That's right. Yeah. No,
Oh,
we're not really going
heavens.
to slaughter chickens.
Yeah, please don't. Yeah, please let me. Oh, heavens.
Yeah.
Mike, this is why I got you here. You keep me out of trouble. Oh, heavens. So yeah, we finished with the labor there, right? And now, as I walked up there, I felt I got a little bit out of order. Would you have gone to the showbread, or would you have gone to the altar of incense next? Or what order would you have?
You're supposed to go to the menorah.
To the menorah.
Yeah.
Okay, to the menorah next.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we walked up, there was such a crowd of us in there. We
Yeah.
we each went to
Yeah.
like the section
I
as
know.
to what was open next. So let me go in order here. Here, let me. All right. So going to the menorah. So the menorah obviously is the seven candlesticks, right? For
Mhm.
anybody who's kind of stepped in and joining us, there's it's the seven candlesticks. They represent the seven spirits of God that we can read in Isaiah 11.
Mhm.
And so we talked about how 6 is the number of man, because the center candlestick is the spirit of Adonai, right? Spirit of our Lord. So if you look at each of the other 6, there's a concept of, God grant me knowledge, counsel,
Mhm.
wisdom. I was looking at these 6. I was like, we can pursue each of these on our own. And if you're trying to live a good life, then you are pursuing
Yeah,
these 6
pretty
on
much.
your own, right? To some extent. But you're not capable of reaching the highest level of those unless you're supported by this candlestick in the middle, unless you're supported by the spirit of Adonai, unless you're supported by God himself.
So that would be like man's wisdom versus God's wisdom.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There is a limited level of wisdom
Mm-hmm.
that absolutely we can reach because we have some degree of being able to know what's
Yeah.
right. But there is some level of counsel, there's some degree of power,
Mhm.
there's some degree of knowledge, all of these things that we can reach. But without the support of Adonai, we never reach the highest level of these.
Mm.
You also talked about that if you would hold your hand out to the menorah, you would see the light shining through, right?
Yeah.
And again, we're talking representative, how we talk about this representing the Spirit of God, that you would
Yeah.
see the Spirit of God shining through you. So understand this is a dark room, right? The menorah is basically one of the only source of light in there, with potentially the conversation, maybe some of the Shekinah of God Adonai from the Holy of Holies, but basically
Mhm.
this menorah is the only source of light in there. And so while I was standing there, I held out my hand because my wife reminded me of this. She was there. She held out her hand, and I held out my hand there, and I'm like, 5 fingers representing 5 books of the Torah. And if I hold it out, I see 4 lines between my fingers, which are the 4 Gospels
Yeah.
shining through the Torah.
Mm. What a picture.
Yeah, yeah. As I'm standing there and I'm searching for this deeper, I'm waiting, I'm thinking, I'm floating, I'm searching for this deeper revelation there. But before I get to what I just shared with there, I did come to another realization, and that was that we needed to move the menorah farther away from the cross that you had set up, and it was for no theological reason, sir.
Hmm.
It was that we nearly caught your wife's hair on fire.
This is true. But yeah, my basement is not that big. So yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, Kathy's hair was about 3 finger widths away from one of those candles, and
Yeah.
I just picture God up there being like, I've never heard anybody sincerely pray, Lord, let there be no Lord, let there be no hairspray in this woman's hair, but man, he actually meant that prayer.
There you go. Yeah.
So yeah, Kathy's hair did not catch fire, and so it ended up being a small. There's joy and humor in every aspect of
Hmm.
our life.
Yeah, I saw you do that. I was on the other side of the room.
Yes, yes. So that was my menorah experience and the brief excitement we avoided there of burning Kathy's hair. So
So
glad
from
that
there,
that didn't.
you would go to the showbread.
Right. So we go to the showbread. And so like that was when I come over there and like the showbread the represents and many times used to represent body of Messiah
Okay.
renewed by him.
You
Oh,
froze up there just for a second.
frozen up.
Yeah, it represents the body of Messiah.
Yeah, it represents the body of Messiah. And from there, this representation is that we should be drawing our strength from him because we no longer have to stand on our own. We no longer, even if we're the only one in our family doing this whole walking with God and trying to live our lives better, we're no longer relying on our own strength.
Hmm.
We take strength from him. Maybe that's something we ignore sometimes, is that we
Right.
have someone
Yeah.
there who will strengthen us. And so I come then to the altar of incense. We talk about the altar of incense being, if you go to Revelations, and where we go to Revelations, where we'll talk about our prayers being offered up as
Hmm.
incense before God, right? Our prayers mingling together and being carried up
Yeah.
before Him. Really interesting thing that you went over is you talked about frankincense, right?
Hmm.
That's what would have been offered there. You drop a little. It's a tree sap.
Yeah.
All right, I could nerd out and give you all the genus and species or whatever because I went in there and I looked this up because it fascinated me. You alter this little bit of tree sap, and as you alter it on the coals of the altar of incense as it burns, it's this very intense fragrance.
Hmm.
There's no ignoring it, right? Is there some incense? Is there some frankincense around here burning or not? Like you don't ask that, okay? It's immediately obvious. Here's the fascinating thing is that the frankincense, that sap only comes out if the tree is wounded.
Yeah.
Right? You get these cuts on the tree, and
Yeah.
the sap is released. That sap crystallizes and is collected, and that is what is burned that releases the incense. So there's a interesting connection there between this fragrance coming up from the healing from wounds. I would propose to you that the healing from our wounds and the offering up of our prayers is inseparable.
Wow. Okay.
Because it's no, God he doesn't just do these things by accident. He
Yeah.
doesn't throw a dart and say, hey, burn this random thing on my altar. No, he picked frankincense. And so, not that we offer up pain and suffering, but rather that as we heal, as we pray from these, as we pray, we heal from our damage done. We heal from our trauma. As we heal from our trauma, our prayers become a sweeter incense to God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one had me thinking a lot.
Yeah.
And then from there, you had a cross is a nice, gentle word, but best translation is the execution stake.
Mm-hmm.
And an execution stake standing to the left of the entrance into the Holy of Holies. And before we entered into that representation of the Holy of Holies, the last thing we did was kneel before the cross. And I don't know anyone who's accepted Yeshua that can ever kneel before the cross and not, you get something every time, right? You get something every time. And so I knelt there beside my wife. I wasn't sure what I was going to, you never know what God will reveal to you there. As I knelt down and looked up at the cross, that execution stake, oh man, I just felt like I couldn't look up at it. I just had to bow my head before it. And my thought right there was, there's a king I would follow. I don't remember the last time, and maybe you can tell me within your life. I'm not going to get political here, but ponder it in your earthly, within earthly politics. When was the last time you looked at a leader in our nation that you said, there's a man I would follow? I'm not going to try to get political and then like debate left, right. I don't care which side, Democratic, Republican, you vote for. When was the last time we looked at a man?
I've been around a lot longer than you have, and I can say there's not a single politician that I've ever met. And I've met some that have been, touted as very godly, and I'm not judging anything. But in the end, when you kind of, it's the man behind the curtain. And I'll give you an example. There was a man who was running for an office, and I knew one of his high ups, and so I ended up being a meeting that they were at, and we're in a neighborhood kind of setting, cameras going off and all this stuff, and it's supposed to be just ad libbed and all of these things, and just a nice little meeting here. And then I see one of his workers kind of look down, cover his hands and say, "How about a song?" And this person says, "Oh, yeah. Well, do we have that guitar in the bus?" Yeah, yeah. We don't know what it is to have a perfect king.
No,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
Even much more so than having a perfect king. You look at, whether you're in a business and you've got a boss who's a manager, whether you're looking at politics, there's this idea though that, they'll usually stand back and tell you what they need you to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I look up at that execution stake and I'm like, he led the way.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't stand back and tell, here's what you need to do. to pay for your sins.
Yeah.
Mhm. He went ahead of me and led the way.
Yeah. No doubt.
So that ended up being the deepest thought I had right there as I looked up was, there's a king I would follow.
Yeah. Worth following.
Worth following. Indeed.
Yeah.
Worthy. Worthy.
Worthy of following.
There's a word that, oh, it's such a small word, but it has such a deep meaning, whether someone's worthy.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah. And then you step into this hoopah, like a marriage canopy. It's a representation. And once again, I want to just kind of insert in here that we were not trying to replicate anything, but this is a representation of kind of like a model. And if we look at Romans or at Hebrews chapter 8, the tabernacle was actually an earthly model of a spiritual realm tabernacle. And so I was doing kind of a model of a model, but just to represent,
Right.
what the actual is, which is to represent what the actual is actually, but I won't go into any more of that one.
Right.
So you and Mary then walked under that hoopah together.
Um, before I ever walk into this hoopah, this area representing the Holy of Holies, I'm standing outside it. I've read the scripture a few times. I'm standing there fully understanding that one, this is not the Holy of Holies there, right? But representing it. I look at it and I can clearly see there's no veil hanging, right?
Yeah.
The veil was ripped.
Yeah.
I can stand there and intellectually tell you, yes, in a manner of speaking that will keep you up at night, Yeshua in a manner has made me his Holy of Holies and that he dwells within me.
Yeah.
That'll keep you awake.
Yeah, should.
It should. It should. But I'm standing outside that and I cannot walk into this representation of this Holy of Holies. Because there was something about it. We all gathered there, all prayed, and we're all there seeking God, and we're all standing out there going, this right here, it became a special place.
Mm-hmm.
Very holy ground. Okay. We'll say that and they don't mean that, but I assure you that was holy ground.
Yeah.
I'm standing there staring at this Holy of Holies thinking, I'm not worthy to go in. Now I know that I've already been forgiven, that my sins are already paid for. But I had that feeling so that God could give me one more thing he wanted to tell me. Two more things, actually, he wanted to tell me. And so I'm standing there praying to God, knowing it's just a representation, knowing I'm already saved, knowing that there's no veil there, saying I'm not worthy to go in. The answer I got was, God's answer was, that's the whole reason I created you, was so that you could come in and talk to me, so that we could be together, so that we would not be separated. I'm like, oh, oh, yeah, I'm coming in, Lord. I'm coming in. And I go in there and I kneel down next to my wife in this special place. And my thought as I'm going in there, God's saying, that's the whole reason I created you, was for you to come in here and talk to me. And besides that, I'm the one that created you. Who are you to tell me you're not worthy?
Oh, there you go. Now you started meddling.
I have, all right? Like, this isn't like, oh, this is why I lost sleep that night, okay? Seriously, because like, I created you. He said, this is why I created you. What are you doing telling there that I'd rip this veil open so you would walk in, figuratively speaking, you would walk in with me. And as I walk in this representation, I'm kneeling there. I'm looking for one more revelation. one more thing from God. I'm praying for it. Give me one more thing, God.
Hmm.
And I realize the thought that kept coming back around to me is, hmm, there's no rope tied to my ankle. Would you explain that one for those who maybe are not as familiar with
So
that? Tell me
there's
what
a
to you.
yeah. So there's a tradition that well, we know that the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh Kodeshim, once a year on the day of Yom Kippur, and would offer up the sacrifice. Would actually sprinkle the blood from the altar upon the Ark of the Covenant. The high priest would have on his garment a bell and a bell and a pomegranate all the way around, and that would actually produce a tinkling sound along as he was walking. Only the high priest was allowed to go into the Holy of Holies. So what if he goes in an unworthy manner and he dies? What do you do? They've read the story of who was it that I can't remember his name. I just read it the other day. Uriah that put his hand out to stabilize the ark and was killed on the spot. And so the tradition is that they would actually tie a rope onto the foot of the high priest, so that if they didn't hear the sound for an extended amount of time, they would be able to drag him back out.
Right. And there's where my thoughts went of realizing that I'm sitting within the Holy of Holies. And I don't mean this representation, all right? I mean that, yeah, that Yeshua, God Himself, dwells within me in
Yeah.
the matter of the Holy of Holies. And I'm never going to be struck down for my imperfections.
Greater love.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm. I mean, what do you say to that, Alex, of understanding, each of us knows ourselves, as you've been expounding on. We all know ourselves. There's things that, that nobody knows about me, struggles that I have. And, a lot of people look and go, well, he doesn't have, yeah, we all have struggles. And
Absolutely.
it doesn't matter what age you are, you're going to have these things. And to even think that he would desire to want to dwell with me and in me is I mean, that's a statement that is far beyond my comprehension.
Ooh, yes. Yes. And I think that even beginning to understand that gap there, it feels like there's there at least. There's this massive divide between as unholy and unworthy as we are, and the complete holy and worthy God. There are many people throughout history, incredibly intelligent people who've come to the belief there absolutely has to be a God.
Hmm.
Some of the most brilliant minds in history are like, there has to be a God. But we're unable to believe in Him as a personal God who cared about them.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that the enemy uses against us. There's no way someone so good, so pure, and so amazing could love you, but he does.
Yeah. And people say, well, okay, what is the purpose of Messiah? Is you're talking about a gap. There's a gap between a perfect God and an unperfect man. And
Yes,
you've heard me talk about this, that the one thing that separates what we believe today, and I know there's differences within this belief, the one thing that separates us from every other religion on planet Earth is this, that whether it be Confucius or Confused or Buddha or whatever that religion is. It's about, well, I can do this to get to God.
To get to God. Every religion is about getting to God.
And what I believe is that there's nothing I can do to get to him, so he came to me.
Exactly. Exactly.
In fact, you've heard in the Aaronic blessing that I do every week, the first words of that can accurately be translated into, he who exists will kneel before you presenting gifts.
Hmm.
The creator of this universe would kneel down to my level. It's like with James and Judd, your boys. I like to, whenever we get into a little conversation, I like to kneel down. So I'm looking at them face to face and not them, staring up at, they're they're growing, but I got a little bit of height on them. I like to kneel
Right.
down and come down to their level. And that is the gospel that the Father, the Creator, found. He put within the whole system of creation a way that he could come, and he could come down to us so that we may go up to him.
Absolutely. Someone asked, I can't again quote who this was. I'll have to double check on this, but um, someone was asked, this is an original thought to me, what will be the most important sentence in the Bible? See, basically the answer is I can bring it down to one word. And so what the most important single word in the Bible is and how it separates us from all other religions. And that is Emmanuel.
Yeah.
God with us.
Yeah.
Because this isn't about us trying to get to God. If you're sitting here trying to get to God, even if you're in, denominational, you're in this beside this Torah walk, if you're, Messianic Judaism, if you're trying to get to God,
Mhm.
you're going about it wrong. Emmanuel, he's coming to you. He
And
came to you.
and we've got to start wrapping this up a little bit. Maybe we might come back to it again because there's some questions I have to ask you. But something that I've never said before. Now I've probably done that teaching, Alex, 100 times. Literally in Brussels, Belgium, in Antwerp, Belgium, in Seattle, Virginia, Florida, Los Angeles, most points in between. And I've never spoken these words like this regarding the forgiveness that it says he is able to say to forgive every sin. And that's a difficult thing, but for us to understand. But I've had people in counseling that I've counseled with, and they said, well, I know that God forgives me, but I can't forgive myself. And I said it about as straight as I think I can ever say it on Shabbat. For us to look at him and say, well, I know you can forgive me, but I can't forgive myself, is maybe the most arrogant statement on the planet.
Absolutely.
Because it's saying, I am above God.
If that doesn't give you chills, you need to listen to it again.
Yeah. Yeah. So his presence, Alex, give me just a couple words. And again, we've got to close this out. Give me just a thought regarding his being in his presence. Is it growing up as a Southern Baptist? Was that something you were ever taught?
Oh, not near in his manner, not in the manner that made it hit home
Mm-hmm.
nearly as much when I came to understand it from the foundations, which was, the tabernacle, which was the model of salvation.
Yeah.
So to be in his presence is typically taught in most denominational, and I think I'm correct in saying it's typically taught in most denominational. It's only taught about how unworthy you are to be in his
Mm-hmm.
presence. But you're not wrong that you're unworthy, but you're missing that's the least important part, and that is to be in his presence means you're right where he wants you, where he wanted you to be before the foundation of before he ever said, let there be light. He said, 6,000 years from now, I've got a conversation I want to have with Mike Clayton on this Shabbat. And like, I don't say that lightly. I'm completely serious. Like, if you
Yeah,
start
I
pondering it from
know.
that standpoint,
I know.
it's a different perspective. It'll change your life. You're not standing in God's presence of, oh, I'm so unworthy. We got to talk briefly about prayer in this. Well, oh, maybe this may be our next full one. But
Yeah,
let me say,
let's come
we
back
got
to
to wrap
that
this
one.
up. We got to come back to this because
Yeah.
oh man, you're getting me started here. Okay,
Yeah,
we
let's
got to
come
come
back
back
to
to
that
that.
one because
Ooh,
yeah, to consider that I know the plans I have for you, says
mm,
Adonai, for good and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And he waited 6,000 years to have a conversation with Alex Stiles
mhm,
and with every other person that's out there listening to us today.
absolutely.
He's waited 6,000 years to have a relationship with you. So why keep him waiting any longer?
Absolutely.
All
You
right,
know,
Alex.
mm,
See you next week, and let's come back and make another run at this thing, okay?
absolutely. I look forward to it.
All right, take care.
Take care.
Who am I